Okay. Hello, AM Justice. How are you?
Hi, nice to see you, Doug. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I got to ask right off the bat, is AM Justice your real name or is that a author name?
It is my real name by virtue. It's my married name,
Oh, okay.
so it wasn't what I was born with, but it's what I married into, and so it works out really well. So I always joke with people, though, that as an author, I probably should be writing mysteries or westerns with that name.
Well, I was thinking superheroes.
Yeah. People have said that too, so
Yeah,
it's a great superhero name.
you could be doing Marvel Comics type stuff.
Right. I feel like I should, stand with my cape, the wind blowing in my hair.
There you go.
I am mourning justice.
Yeah, Morning Justice. Yeah, perfect. So I've got a very, very short bio for you. I think it's like 3 lines long. And so we may have to fill in a little bit. But it says you're an award winning Brooklyn based author, lover of science and wit, sporadic scuba diver, and a once and future tango dancer. Okay.
Yes. It's the future tango dancer is slipping away as I'm getting older and my knees are wearing out. But I used to be a huge I used to be really into the New York tango scene, and in the 1990s, it's probably where I spent most of my evenings was in one tango salon or another. So I loved that particular dance, and I'd love to get back into it, but I just haven't had the time. So,
What is the scene like? I mean, is it a big community?
it was a small community back when I was partaking of it, which again I haven't danced in probably 20 years. It's one of those things. It's like, oh, I'll get back into it next year, and then the next thing I turn around and 20 years have gone by. But I'd say it's a small community by New York City standards. So there's probably about maybe 500, 5 or 600 really enthusiastic participants in it, but they are very enthusiastic. So it is a community where the passion runs very strong for that particular dance. And it's all, it's a great opportunity for amateurs to mix with professional dancers. So you go to any given tango salon and there will be the top dancers in the world there on any given night. And then, there are beginners there too. And so it's a wonderful opportunity for people to really mix and see each other and learn from each other. And I really loved it. It was just magical sometimes.
So why the tango? What was that? What was about it that attracted you to it?
I'm actually easily bored, and the tango is incredibly complex, and it requires a lot of invention on the part of whoever's leading. So, and a lot of the challenge if you're the follower, because it's a partner dance. So there's leaders and followers, and generally the leaders are usually men and followers are usually women, but not always. But anyway, the point being that it requires invention on both parts. So to do it well and to make it fun and exciting. So it can be, and it's graceful, and it's also really it can be really athletic. It depends on who's dancing. It depends on who's leading. It depends on the particular form that's of music that's being played, because there are slower tangos and then there are more energetic versions. So a milonga is a more energetic, a faster tempo version of the same dance. And then this is all I'm talking about Argentine tango, which is different from the European French tango that you mostly see in movies with people putting roses between their teeth and
You're right.
stomping and dipping. There's actually not a lot of dipping in Argentine tango. It's more about the legs and the overall movement.
Well, that's very interesting about tango. Let's talk a little bit about your book. Your book is called A Wizard's Forge.
Hmm.
Is that your, how many books have you written now?
There are two in that particular series. There's a Wizard's Forge and a Wizard's Sacrifice, and the pair of them are actually a duology. So if people nowadays like to read complete series, and they would get a complete story by reading those two books.
All right, so tell us a little, give us a quick synopsis of the series.
Well, it is a kind of a upside down spin on the chosen one narrative. So, if fantasy readers know that a lot of fantasies revolve around a person who it turns out to be special. They're usually kind of ordinary in the beginning, but then they find that they have a special destiny. And I've played with that idea of having somebody that is known to have a destiny as she discovers it for herself. She undergoes some rather traumatic experiences, um, but things don't turn out the way that everybody thinks they're going to. So that's the way, sort of the whole summation of the two books. But and it's a mix of science fiction and fantasy. It's set on another planet. It's the people in the novel are all descendants of maroon space travelers, and the book is set about 3,000 years after the arrival of the initial settlers on the planet, and they've lost all of their advanced tech. So they basically live kind of with a little bit more than medieval level technology, and yet there are parasites, neurological parasites on the planet that if you become infected with those parasites and you are not killed by them, then you acquire telekinetic powers, and that is what happens to the main character in my series. So, and the main character is a young woman named Victoria, and Vic for short.
Where did this story come from?
I think it was inspired by a lot of things that I read when I was young. I am a child of the 70s, so I did all of my early science fiction reading and fantasy reading were the classic masters from the 60s and 70s. So a lot of inspiration came from authors like Anne McCaffrey and Ursula Le Guin and Frank Herbert, of course. With Dune, everybody is suddenly reacquainted with Frank Herbert, and the idea of space wizards, of people who have magical powers, but set in an outer space kind of setting, like the Jedi and like the Bene Gesserit in Dune. So all of those things sort of were inspirations to me when I was young.
Were you a Star Trek fan?
Yeah, I'm actually, I'm kind of, I lean a little more Star Trek than Star Wars. So in terms of like which one's my favorite, but yes, I grew up watching reruns of the original Star Trek when I got home from school. So I'm a little bit young to have watched. I'm too young to have watched Star Trek when it first ran, but I watched the reruns when I was growing up. And then in the 90s, all of the Next Generation series and so forth. And still am a Star Trek fan to this day. So I've watched Discovery. And I particularly love the Lower Decks series that's on Paramount Plus. It's absolutely fantastic.
Well, the one thing about Star Trek over Star Wars, I
Hmm.
would say, is the character development was better. They're
Yes.
real one-dimensional in Star Wars, you know?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think overall the I think George Lucas is sort of a master at world building and has developed a lot of really interesting worlds. And I think he's got great premises in all of the stories, but the character development just isn't there. So it's the whole progression of Anakin Skywalker from like this this sweet kid into like the evil mastermind of the galaxy was a great idea for a story, but it just was not executed in a way that I personally found to be all that effective. So, but I love that idea, I love the concept of that. But I think overall, I agree that Star Trek, the writing, and I have to say, I'm actually more of a Next Generation fan than an original series. Next Generation to me is the best of the Star Treks, and I do think that the writing and the character development was really stellar in that series and just overall. So I think that's why a lot of us who are more Trek fans identify more with it. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, I think also there was a problem with the story order with George Lucas, where you already knew Darth Vader from 30 years before you figured out the story of him as a kid. And I know that The Godfather was backwards like that when those movies came out. But I think there was just too much time in between, the ones that he did in the 70s and early 80s to the new ones, which didn't come until what, 2000 something?
I think, yeah, I think they started coming out in the late 90s. So
It was like a 20-year
yeah,
gap.
like around there.
There was a 20-year gap between the two series, and even though they tried to make the continuity as good as possible, I think it lost something. I really do. I wish they would have done them in order.
I do. I do think it might have been a harder sell in the 70s to kind of have a science fiction show, which was still in the 70s. Science fiction movies were still very much thought of as being for kids, and to have a series that was really about how somebody became evil might have been a little bit harder sell. But and I personally think A New Hope, which is it's the third chapter in the story, but the first movie that was ever made. That and Empire Strikes Back, I think, are the best of the Star Wars films. So, and you can't beat the classics.
I think on that note, we're going to have to wind this down. We are out of time. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yes, it is amjusticeauthor.com, and let me hold up the book for people. So this is A Wizard's Forge and A Wizard's Sacrifice. And as I mentioned, the two of them are a duology. So for people who like their stories complete, you can get a complete story there. And for people who like science fiction and fantasy blends, it's all in that book.
Okay, they're both out?
They're both out, yes.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Nice meeting you.